Hey friends, I'm Chronically Jenni and welcome to my mobility aid Q&A. I did one of these a long time ago, but I thought it was time for an update and to answer all of your questions that you have about mobility aids, because I have used pretty much every type of mobility aid you can think of in my disability and chronic illness journey. So we're going to be talking all things walking sticks, rollator walkers and wheelchairs and power chairs, and answering all of your questions. I do have a mobility aid tour video where I show you all of my mobility aids, but this one is going to be directly answering your questions. So let's get into it. How do you choose between an electric and a manual wheelchair? For me personally, I struggle to self-propel because I don't have a lot of strength in my shoulders and I have hypermobility, which makes it difficult. So day to day I use a powered wheelchair. But I am working on being able to use my manual wheelchair, because using a powered chair means that I don't get a huge amount of movement and exercise, and I'd love to be able to do that a little bit more. But it's something I'm working with my physiotherapist on, to strengthen my shoulders and build up to that slowly and see if I can build some strength. So it completely depends on you and your needs, and how much you think you can self-propel versus using a power chair, which obviously means that most people can be more independent. I'm scared to tell my family about my rollator. Do you have any advice? I'm really sorry that you're going through this. It's really tough when other people don't accept our mobility aids, especially if they're family, because we rely on their acceptance more than the outside world in general. I think with family and close friends, trying to educate people is worth it in that instance. So if you can send them some articles or some videos of some other people thriving using rollator walkers, then I think that might help them to understand why you need it and why it's important to you and why it allows you to do more. I think that's a really common misconception that people get when we're talking about mobility aids, is that the mobility aid is going to stop you or hold you back, when actually in reality it allows you to do more than you could before and give you freedom and independence that you didn't have. But overall it just comes down to being confident and accepting yourself and accepting using it. It makes life so much easier and more freeing if you can accept it yourself, and just use what you need to use to make your life easier and better. Sending lots of love. Did you try your mobility aids before buying them? Mobility aids can be a really trial and error thing, unfortunately. So the short answer is no, I didn't try any of my aids before buying them. But the one thing that I did do and found really helpful was finding out what type of aid I needed by buying cheap or free or secondhand mobility aids of different types to see what would work for me. For example, with my rollator walker, I bought that off Facebook Marketplace for £10, discovered over the course of my university career that that was the right aid for me, and then afterwards I fundraised to get the rollator that I really wanted and needed and suited my needs a lot better. But I already knew that I wanted a walker before purchasing the more expensive and fundraising for the more expensive option. The other thing that is really good to do is go to something like Nadex, which is a really big show of different mobility aids. You can try out loads and loads there, or there are lots of showrooms across the country where you can try out different aids, and some also have services where they can come to you, bring a chair, you can try it out in your own home, in your own environment, so you can decide if it is the right thing for you before you make a purchase. Another thing that is really good is that a lot of different mobility aid manufacturers and mobility stores and showrooms have a guarantee, so you can use it for 2 weeks or a month or something like that, and if you really don't get on with it, then you can send it back. So I hope those options help. Can I use a mobility aid if other people with my disability never do? This is really going to depend on a lot of factors and depend on your disability, but overall you need to use what helps you. So if you are in pain or you get tired really easily, then using a mobility aid is a really good option. But I would advise that you consult a medical professional if you're able to make sure you're using the right kind of aid for you and you're using that aid in the right way. How do you get around questions about a new mobility aid? For example, what have you done? The best thing that I do in these kind of circumstances is have little scripted answers that I can spout out depending on the situation and how much knowledge someone needs to have. For example, it's different if it's a medical professional versus just someone approaching me on the street. So usually I simply answer, I'm disabled. That usually shuts people up pretty quickly. But please remember that you don't have to share your personal private medical information with anyone. Just because someone asks you doesn't mean they're entitled to your information. This is something that I learned quite a long way into my disability journey, because I thought that I always had to raise awareness, and when that isn't your job, it is my job in some circumstances, but when it isn't your job, you don't have to do that. Tips for self-propelling with shoulder pain. So one of the most important things, especially for hypermobile shoulders, is strengthening your shoulders. So if you're able to see a physiotherapist to work on this specifically and very, very gently, then that's what's really, really gonna help and support your shoulders over time. But some things you can do to support your shoulders, just generally, doesn't have to be for self-propelling, is definitely KT tape, and I will link a video in the description from the KT tape YouTube channel that I use, which is really, really perfect and has worked well for me over the years. But do remember that sometimes KT tape can affect your skin, so that's why I don't tend to use this that much. Instead, I use these kind of compression garments. So this first one is like just a t-shirt that has a zip up the middle, but it's got compression in it and nice support, just like the KT tape in the back. So that's a lot more comfortable and easier for me. And then if you want serious shoulder support, I've got this double shoulder support from DM Orthotics, which is, you know, the best shoulder support that I've ever tried. And this one is also thought about for women with breasts, because it's got a gap that you can actually wear it and it doesn't completely crush your chest and still is able to give your shoulders lots of support. Which of your aids handles steep slopes best? For me, it's definitely my power chairs, my Will C2 and my Scoozy from TGA Mobility. They can handle really steep slopes with ease. As a big bloke, I can't find a nice decent stick. Any suggestions? So I did a little bit of research for you, and the best place that I found is based in the USA, but it's a place called Fashionable Canes, and they have not only a complete men's section, but they also have an XL section. So I really hope that helps. How often do you use each of your mobility aids? I use my different mobility aids kind of just as and when I need, depending on the situation. For me, for any kind of distance, I need my power chair most of the time these days. But if I'm kind of just popping to a shop and I don't want to get my big power chair out of the car, then I'll just use my manual wheelchair. And then it might depend on the terrain or the activity. For example, on the beach, or if it's really, really muddy, then I use my walker or my stick. But I can't do those over long distances, so it completely depends. How do you store your mobility aids? I'm very, very lucky to have quite a lot of mobility aids and quite a lot of different sized mobility aids, so I have lots of different ways of storing them. I'm very lucky to have quite a big garage, so that is mostly my bigger aids parking for my power chairs and my wheelchair and my walkers. They all live in there. But before we had a big garage, I used to just leave them in the car. That was the most safe place and the place big enough to fit them. But at that time I only had like one big aid. And then for my walking sticks, I have it was sold as an umbrella basket, so I'll pop a picture of that, and it just holds all my sticks really, really nicely and is right there so I can grab one. But the other option I've seen lots of people do, which I have got but I haven't tried myself yet, is you can get little mop holders. That's what they sell them as, because they used to be for holding, you know, mops and brooms, and or I guess people still use them for that, but it also works pretty perfectly for a walking stick as well. What instructions or safety precautions do you recommend when using mobility aids? So for this one, I can't really give individual advice because it's going to really depend on who you are, your conditions, the aid you're using. It's a really, really wide spectrum. But my best advice is just follow the manufacturer's instructions. They'll often have really specific things that you should follow to use your mobility aid, and make sure that it doesn't break and you don't break. And then also, if you can get the help of a physio or an OT to help you use your aid in the correct way to stop injury and things like that, then that is the best thing that I recommend. Do you feel different treatment in public when using different aids, for example when you're self-propelling versus someone pushing you in your wheelchair? This is a really, really interesting question. It's not one that I've been asked before, and I think overall if most people are going to be ignorant about disability, then they're just going to be ignorant. It doesn't really matter what aid you're using. I've had it where I was using my powered wheelchair and a person who was helping us with travel assistance was just directing every question to my friend, no matter how many times she bounced it over to me, and just refused to look at me. So I think if people don't understand disability, then they're just not going to. It doesn't really matter on your aid. I think sometimes I have different treatment when I'm using a stick versus a wheelchair. I don't know whether that's because I am perceived as being too young to use a stick, whereas a wheelchair is slightly different. So for example, if I get on a train in my wheelchair, people give up their spaces really, really easily, but if I'm using a stick, they don't so much. Maybe that's just because they see it as a lesser aid. But yeah, that's a really interesting question. I'd love to know your experiences of whether you get treated differently depending on what mobility aid you're using, or if you're self-propelling versus someone pushing you. So let me know in the comments. What is the difference between a rollator walker and a frame walker? So the main difference is wheels. So if you get a framed walker, which are usually the kind of metal grey ones, they've usually got two wheels at the front and are just sticks at the bottom with a little ferrule like a walking stick, and they're mainly used to just get you very short distances because you have to kind of slightly lift and move, whereas a rollator has four wheels on all of the legs, so that you can push it multiple directions and is better for long journeys, or you know, still works really well for day to day, but is more made for going outside and using for longer journeys. How many miles can one power chair do in a single charge, and how long does it take to charge a battery? So this is going to completely depend on what mobility aid you have and its specific specifications. For example, my Scoozy all-terrain mobility scooter can go up to 60 miles on a single charge, but my Will C2, for example, can only do 11. I've never needed to go 60 miles. I've never even got to the full 11. So most powered mobility aids will get you out for a day without having to bother charging it, unless you're planning on going on like a big hike or something like that. But usually a few hours gets me as much as I need. How do you transition between different mobility aids? For me, I've always just swapped and changed and used what I've needed as I've needed it. So it's all come quite naturally to me, and I've gone from using a walking stick more to a wheelchair more to a walker more to a wheelchair more again. So there have been natural points in my kind of disability journey, if you like, where I have used one aid more than another because that's what I need to use more. So I think accepting that has come quite naturally to me. Like, it wasn't a big shock when I started using my power chair more, because that's what I'd really been needing for a long time. So, but obviously it can be something to really get your head around mentally, especially if you're kind of forced to use just one type of mobility aid. So I think being kind to yourself and listening to your body and accepting and using what you need is really, really important. But also remember that acceptance with disability in general is a journey, and it's not a linear journey. It's not just going to be like, okay, I've learned some stuff and now I accept that I'm disabled and I accept that I use it. There are some days where I don't like the fact that I have to use an aid, but I do it, and as soon as I do it, I remember the things that it gives me, that it allows me to do that I couldn't do without them. You know, it's a tough thing, accepting disability in general, not just mobility aids. So just remember to be kind to yourself. Remember that you might step backwards on that journey or feel like you step backwards with your acceptance, but it will come back to a place where you can use your aids in the way that you need to use them. What mobility aids are best for different tasks, outings, symptoms, etc. This is another one where it's going to completely depend on you, your individual disability, your individual symptoms, your individual needs. It's going to completely depend on what mobility aids you have at your disposal. So again, it's just important to listen to your body and use what you think works best for you in whatever situation you find yourself in, and don't. You remember that you can use different aids for different days, that it's fine if you just use a walking stick around your house but need a wheelchair when you go out the house. That's a normal experience to have. But for those people who have symptoms that change quite quickly or quite sporadically, and also people who are able to do like different things in one day, I really recommend something like the Rolls Motion, which is a walker that transforms from a walker into a wheelchair. And this just means that you can have the best of both worlds. If you're more ambulatory, that you can walk for a bit, and then if you get tired or in pain or dizzy or have any other kind of symptoms that means you need to be seated and use a wheelchair, it means you've got that option available to you right then and there, and you can just switch it from one to the other without having to bring loads of different mobility aids with you when you're going out for the day. What are your thoughts on the FlexyFoot Ferrule? I do have one of these. Oh, more paint's coming off of it. This is a FlexyFoot Ferrule. I tried to spray paint mine because they only come in like grey and orange or black and orange, and I wanted it a different colour, but as you can see the spray paint didn't adhere to the plastic very well. But these are really good if you need a more kind of comfortable base for your walking sticks or crutches. It makes it much more comfortable and gives you that feeling of having a little bit of suspension if you're going to be walking over uneven ground. However, the one thing to think about with this is that it does significantly increase the height of your stick. So if you have a stick that is just one height, then this probably won't work for you. But it does mean that if you want to wear high heels and increase the height of your stick that is just a standard length, then you can using this. But if you have an adjustable stick, then this is going to work really well, because you can adjust it and it will be the same height that you usually use. They do have several different sizes as well, so just make sure you get the correct size so that it will fit your stick. Any tips for flying as a wheelchair user? This is something that I haven't braved yet myself. I've taken my walkers on flights before, but I have not taken a wheelchair. I think just a general advice for disability at airports is just make sure that you book assistance and make sure that you call up and double check that you've got it booked. It's a really difficult system, unfortunately, and I know a lot of brilliant people are doing a lot of brilliant work on making flying better for disabled people. If you want to look into it a bit more, the Rights on Flights movement is really good if you want to research a little bit more. But the one thing that I would say is that some airlines do allow you to keep your mobility aid in the cabin instead of going into hold. So ask if this is an option. I do know that Virgin definitely do that. It may just be for manual chairs, but definitely ask the question if you can keep it in the cabin with you, so there's no risk of it getting lost or damaged in the same way that they can unfortunately do if you put them in the hold. If you do have to put your wheelchair in the hold, the best advice that I've seen is taking it into as many bits as you can and making sure that you wrap up and protect all of those bits and pieces, and put them into a secure bag if you're able to. Otherwise, yeah, just try and protect your wheelchair as much as humanly possible. We shouldn't have to be doing this in 2024. The amount of wheelchairs that get damaged by airlines shouldn't be happening in 2024. I had one of my walkers sadly damaged when I took it on a plane, and it was just taken off and hold. And I've also had issues getting my walkers back after flying, which, you know, is really upsetting and frustrating, and I know why it puts a lot of people off. But I'm really hoping that this Rights on Flights movement does make a difference, and I will find the confidence to get on a plane again. But otherwise, I recommend cruise holidays from the UK because that's what I do. Do you decide to use mobility aids, or will medical professionals tell you to use them? I've had a really mixed bag in my experiences. When I first got a walking stick, I worked with my physio at the time on using that and using it correctly and making sure that it was actually helping me. I think that's something that's really important, to make sure you're using aids correctly and getting that support if it's available to you. I know not everyone has access to that kind of thing. Some aids have then been suggested to me by OTs, and these are and not necessarily mobility aids, but things like my shower chair and different stools for in the house and different bits and pieces that I've then bought personally because they weren't available to get via the occupational therapy team. And other situations I've had with my wheelchair. Basically what happened is I had surgery and couldn't get anywhere without a wheelchair, so I borrowed one because I had to use one, and then I found it quite helpful and just kept using it for different things. And my medical team is aware that I use a wheelchair and need a wheelchair to get around, so they support me with those as best as they can. So it is personal choice to an extent, i.e. you can just go and buy yourself a walking stick, buy yourself a wheelchair or a walker, and I think the thing with medical professionals and disability is that at no point in the last 8 years of being disabled has a doctor ever said to me, you are disabled. They're not going to give you that, can't think of the right word, they're not going to say you are now disabled, because it's for the person to personally identify at any point. And using mobility aids does not mean whether you're disabled or not. Disabilities can be invisible, so it's getting aids in the right way, that using them the right way, getting that support from medical professionals or occupational therapy and physio are probably the most important people to get that advice from before you start using it. But then it's using what helps you, because not all medical professionals are pro mobility aids, sadly, and that makes me very, very sad, because I wouldn't get out of the house without my mobility aids. So yeah, they're really, really important. How to feel more confident using your mobility aids. My first piece of advice, as always, is fake it till you make it. Just fake feeling confident until you actually feel confident. So many people ask me, like, what do you do if you get funny looks or things like that? And I've actually found in being confident in myself, being confident in my style, I don't notice looks. And also if I get comments, they're usually about my outfit or my cool wheels or something like that, instead of being, you know, sad, not very nice comments. So I think just making yourself feel more confident is going to make others around you feel that confidence and not question you as much. And another thing that I find really, really helpful in accepting your mobility aids and finding confidence in them is finding mobility aids that suit you and your style and your personality. Now this can be finding specific aids that already have a certain look. I've seen a bright pink mobility scooter going around on Facebook at the moment, but if you don't have the budget for that, or you don't find something that aligns with your personality, you can personalize your aids completely on your own. With my first walker and my first walking sticks, I would put stickers on them, cover them in tape, just decorate them so that they felt more me and less medical, and I think that really, really helped me gain confidence using my aids. Thank you so much for watching my mobility aid Q&A. I really, really hope that you found some of my answers helpful. If you have any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thank you so much again for watching. If you've liked this video, I'd love it if you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please do hit the subscribe button. I make videos about disability education, disability hacks, and mobility aid tips and tricks, so please do make sure you give me a subscribe, and I'll see you very soon for another video. Mwah.